I'm going to be talking about speed because sometimes the simplest solutions are the best solutions. Um, Everyone thinks like Solana's fast enough already and Solana's good enough already, except Ethereum is actually where most of the activity happens on chain, where most of the liquidity happens on chain, and the most, continuous established blockchain. Um, so my presentation is called Ethereum at Infinite Speed, a new generation of applications and adoption. So when Ethereum first was introduced to us, we envisioned a world on chain. We believed that Ethereum would change basically the financial system, at least sometime in the future. And since Ethereum is the internet of value, what if it also moved at the speed of the internet? So the original vision was a fundamental transformation of the global financial system. For example, decentralized control by enabling trustless, intermediary-free systems, automated and secure financial processes with smart contracts, and financial inclusion by lowering the barriers to entry for banking. Also, widespread adoption of decentralized technology with simplified decentralized apps to onboard millions of users, perhaps billions, and to empower community with decentralized governance. And as of today, especially recently, Ethereum does dominate again, as opposed to the last speech I gave back in Da Nang, where Solana was pretty dominant. Ethereum has the highest TVL, the deepest liquidity, the most developer activity, as well as the most security. You could even argue that it also has the most transaction volume. And Ethereum isn't going anywhere. It's the trust anchor of the entire ecosystem, even outside of EVM, with blockchain in general. But it's still too slow. So if we want the next billion users, we can't ask them to wait. Let's stop waiting for adoption and let's actually build for it. Web3 has not gained significant global adoption yet, despite many advantages, such as general crypto adoption. The DEX to SEX volume is still only 12%, despite less regulation, despite clearer regulation. The election of Donald Trump, who ran on a pro-crypto platform. The immediate borderless global access that building in crypto can give you, as opposed to if you were building in a more regulated space and had to deal with a lot more compliance, as well as other border differences. Also, incremental scaling and UX improvements have gone on since the beginning, and they have been pretty significant, as well as just having good enough ecosystems. But why haven't we reached any significant adoption, despite all this media coverage, despite everything that's in our favor? There are just too many problems. We're asking the world to meet us where we are instead of meeting them where they are, in terms of user experience, in terms of like the product. So some of the biggest problems are at the infrastructure level. They're pretty obvious ones. Whenever you use an on-chain app or perform an on-chain transaction, you all have the same experience. The wait times, the high fees, the higher fees whenever the blockchain gets more congested, the wallet friction, the complex UX, the pop-ups, fragmentation, as well as especially security, and also the security and insurance that comes with self-custody. Decentralization, unfortunately, doesn't outweigh this. Like, a lot of people don't actually care about these ideals. What they want is a seamless way to trade their crypto, to perform their transactions, whatever they are. And until we give that to them, adoption will be a huge challenge. Ethereum layer 2s were meant to fix this, to scale one of the biggest ecosystems on blockchain. However, to date, they've only introduced incremental improvements. They're not scalable enough. Their fees aren't near zero, and their UX isn't instant. And what we expect them to want is instant confirmations, a real-time feeling when they're using blockchain apps, no signing delays or reloads, and low to near zero cost, if any, as well as no congestion. So that's where the blockchain that I'm introducing comes in. So Rise is literally, as of today, the fastest blockchain. It's built on Ethereum, and if you compare these, you'll see that we're actually not just incrementally improving performance. Now is the era of basically next generation, second generation, layer 2 scaling solutions. So these are the top 3 fastest layer 2 scaling solutions, at least on my radar. And according to this gamified test that we've done, anyone, anywhere in the world can test basically the response time that they get across any chain from their browser. And as of yesterday from Vietnam, I'm getting 278 millisecond average latency from Vietnam to the sequencer, basically. Mega ETH they come in second or third at pretty decent, closely, not very noticeable latency comparatively, as well as fuel. And just as another example, this is how second generation layer 2s compare to first generation layer 2s, such as Arbitrum, Optimism, and Base. So here is an example of exactly how fast these are, 10 sequential transactions. There was music, so this wouldn't be as awkward of a silence. So basically, as you can see, like these new generation layer 2s, Mega ETH, Rise, Fuel, and a few others are definitely trying to achieve this very simple answer to adoption. But adoption is not only about response time, it's also about response time and speed at scale. So, for example, Rise on the right here, in terms of compute, in terms of bandwidth, we also have a very high bandwidth as well as a high target bandwidth. We are targeting around 10 gigagas or over 100,000 transactions per second that we will be able to handle. Up until recently, we've been able to handle over 50,000 transactions in a single 1-second block. Mega ETH as well has the same goal, and then Base, their goal is around 1 gigagas per second or 1 billion gas per second. So that is basically not just an incremental improvement. Now back to how Rise is able to be so fast. Well, this is inspired by something that Solana actually developed, which was shreds. So we have what we call Rise shreds. And basically right now, if you look at, I guess, generation 1, first generation layer 2s, such as Arbitrum, Optimism, and such, you'll find that like the transaction confirmations are still too slow compared to Web 2. It's around 1 to 2 seconds. However, with Rise, we basically use variable 1 millisecond, around 1 millisecond, early pre-confirmations to enable a user experience like Web 2, which basically opens up the ability to build Web 2-like experiences on blockchain apps. And not only this, but let's say an alternative second generation layer 2 will also be able to do this, but Rise does this with secured pre-confirmations as opposed to unsecured pre-confirmations. Back to here. So on top of that, it's not just about speed. It's not just about speed at scale. It's also about speed at scale decentralized. So decentralization, like one of the key components of blockchain tech, is still very important to Rise. We do not want to compromise on this point. So we've also been developing a way to integrate based sequencing at performance levels. So base sequencing at scale and with the current latency that we have. So based on our current research and contributions to base sequencing, we were able to achieve this within the next year. And to define it, base sequencing is a mechanism that delegates transaction ordering to Ethereum's layer 1 validator set and a network of permissionless transaction builders. This has many key benefits for us. So besides the performance, there's also eliminating the need for a centralized sequencer, which is definitely one of the biggest criticisms of layer 2 blockchains, as well as censorship resistance because it's no longer a centralized sequencer. And then you're also inheriting Ethereum, the layer 1, a few properties from there, such as Ethereum's liveness, so uptime, as well as synchronous composability between the L2 and the L1, as well as between L2s that are also based. And just to illustrate an example, like theoretically, you should be able to perform a transaction on Rise, and then that transaction can use liquidity on Ethereum L1. This means that both performance and decentralization can coexist. And Rise is here to bring you all of that with minimal compromise. Now, what does all of this unlock? Speed plus speed at scale plus speed at scale decentralized. Well, there's a bunch of different new use cases that weren't possible before. And in Rise's case, Rise was founded by 3 people that have a strong experience in the app building space. And we were all very frustrated with the way blockchain apps work. And I, as a growth person, I don't want to spend my time on something that won't get adoption. I want to basically find something really good and then bring it to market, bring it to the world. So we're not just building this to launch a token. We're not just building this, just to say we're the fastest chain. We're building this to unlock a whole new set of use cases and apps that can exist on chain, especially bringing all of that existing centralized crypto activity on blockchain. For example, fully on-chain order books, such as a centralized exchange to order books. We can bring that on chain. Order book strategies, options and option strategies, high-frequency trading, payments, remittances, foreign exchange markets, as well as basically tokenized high-frequency stocks. Apart from advanced finance use cases, there's also gaming, as well as social networks, and much more. So we're very excited to have our first round of applications. A lot of these are within the advanced DeFi applications to start experimenting and then bringing them to market. So basically, in summary, Ethereum remains one of the most secure and adopted blockchains in the world. Now, after many years of development and incremental improvements, layer 2s can now scale meaningfully, and the infrastructure is now ready for all of these speed, scale, and decentralization to coexist. That means that the real-time on-chain economy is now here and ready for adoption. And just as an additional benefit, the Ethereum layer 1 mainnet is also scaling at the same time, which means as a based rollup, as a based sequencing layer 2 on top of Ethereum, you not only have an amazing amount of scalability and an amazing amount of new use cases, but built on top of mainnet, which is also scaling, and built synchronously composable with mainnet, means that it unlocks even more network effects, even more use cases. So thank you very much for listening. Rise is new. We're about to launch within a few months. We're backed by Vitalik, Stanny, Sandeep, Galaxy Ventures, and a few others. We worked really hard to raise funds in this environment, and we're probably going to have an exciting announcement for the community next week. Thank you.